Up next in the broadcast, at the National Assembly review of current inter-Korean relations, the Prime Minister says North Korea's rejection of talks because of anti-Pyongyang leaflets is regrettable, while the Unification Minister urges Seoul to take the initiative to bring the two sides together. A German lawmaker who recently made a 6-day trip to North Korea says Pyongyang actually does want to sit down with South Korea for talks to build trust and improve relations. And the United Nations warns that soaring temperatures is making the world unlivable and that we have only until the year 2100 to eliminate the use of fossil fuels in order to avoid severe, widespread, and irreversible effects. Primetime News begins now.
Welcome to Primetime News, everyone. Hope your week is off to a great start. Coming to you live from Seoul, I am Kang Kerry.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us tonight. We begin over at the National Assembly, where the main rival parties are showing a clear disparity over the government's foreign and security-related policies.
And lawmakers were particularly divided on Seoul's stance on the anti-North Korea leaflet launches. Our Choi Yoo-sun has more on this ongoing debate.
At Monday's interpellation session, the opposition party urged Seoul to intervene and stop South Korean civic groups from launching flyers that criticize the North Korean leadership across the border. The anti-North Korea leaflets have become a major obstacle in improving inter-Korean relations, with Pyongyang accusing Seoul of scheming against the regime, leading to their failed high-level talks late last month.
Severing inter-Korean dialogue because of the leaflets is being very narrow-minded. It's a digression from long-awaited conciliatory mood that has been established after a long impasse.
Opposition lawmakers also raised concerns about North Korean threats against the safety of South Koreans living near the border.
We have no legal basis to control the leaflet launches, but we are taking appropriate measures when problems arise related to public safety or from internal conflict.
The Prime Minister, as well as the ruling party, criticized Pyongyang for citing the leaflets as the reason that led to failed talks. As for delaying the deadline for Seoul to regain wartime operational control of its troops from Washington, the ruling side said the decision was necessary for South Korea to better counter against North Korean nuclear threats.
The government should create a task force of experts to come up with a detailed roadmap to secure a defense budget needed for the command control transfer.
While the opposition side demanded President Park Geun-hye apologize for failing to fulfill her campaign pledge, the Prime Minister said it was only right for Seoul to postpone the handover until a condition is achieved where Pyongyang drops all its nuclear ambitions. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
And staying with the North Korean issues, the pressure to denuclearize on North Korea is mounting. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says China is putting stronger pressure on North Korea than it was a year ago, signing trade restrictions. Our Kim Min-ji has the details.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has praised China for doing more to pressure North Korea. Speaking with Bloomberg News, Kerry said the Chinese were taking measures beyond the ones they were a year ago. He cited examples such as China reducing the amount of jet fuel being exported to the north and additional limitations being placed on trade. Kerry also noted that Chinese President Xi Jinping has held at least 5 meetings with South Korean President Park Geun-hye, but none with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Seoul and Washington have long called on China, North Korea's only major ally, to play a greater role in getting Pyongyang to demonstrate a willingness to give up its nuclear weapons. But Beijing had been accommodating toward the north in fear of hurting Chinese national interests. Kerry added that there's still an uncertainty as to where the North Korean leader wants to take his country and that this view is shared by China. The top U.S. diplomat also said Washington is as keen as Beijing to restart the long-stalled six-party talks on the North's denuclearization, but stressed the U.S. needs assurances that Pyongyang is prepared to discuss scrapping its nuclear weapons. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And while there are calls to Pyongyang to return to the negotiating table, German lawmaker Hartmut Kuschik, a longtime advocate for inter-Korean unification, says North Korea actually wants to talk to South Korea. Mr. Kuschik was in Pyongyang for 6 days recently and held talks with the chairman of the Supreme People's Assembly and North Korea's vice foreign minister. Our Hwang Sung-hee sat down with Mr. Kuschik for an exclusive interview.
When you talked to North Korean officials during your stay there, what did they say about inter-Korean relations?
Many of the North Korean officials I spoke with were very clear. North Korea hopes to improve relations with South Korea. The attendance of 3 high-level officials at the closing ceremony of the Asian Games shows this very well. They said rebuilding trust is the most important step for improving South-North relations. As the basis for trust building, they referred to former South Korean President Kim Dae-jung's visit to North Korea in 2000 and the June 15th joint statement that followed.
There are speculations about the regime instability in North Korea. What was your impression?
Of course, Kim Jong-un's power cannot be compared to that of his father, Kim Jong-il, in his prime, but he has enough leverage to control the current situation. The power is not held solely by him, though. It is divided among other agents, such as the party, the military, or the economic bodies. But Kim is able to maintain a balance among them. However, I do see a need for a policy to promote overall stability.
So before your visit to Pyongyang, you also visited China and you met with officials there. Did you have any talks about North Korea with them?
There are tensions between North Korea and China. China wants North Korea to return to the six-party framework and to pursue more reform measures on its own. But at the same time, its biggest interest is securing stability in North Korea and on the Korean peninsula. Therefore, Beijing is not opposed to Pyongyang's relations with Europe and Berlin. And China believes its friendship with South Korea is helpful in maintaining stability on the Korean peninsula and Northeast Asia.
You've been a long-time advocate of the unification of the two Koreas. In your view, what's the biggest hurdle to the Korean unification, and how do we make that leap?
The challenge can be largely divided into two. First is solving the dire humanitarian situation in North Korea. The second, and the most important and difficult task, is North Korea's nuclear program. The neighboring countries must also be considered. The fundamental step is resolving tensions between the two Koreas, but at the same time, seeking understanding from the United States, China, and Japan remains a challenge.
And where does Germany come in?
Germany will not be a mediator. It will also not be a master that can offer a great deal of knowledge. But what we can do is to give little bits of advice based on our own experience with unification.
Thank you, Mr. Kuschik, for your time today.
It was a pleasure for me.
Parliamentary lawmakers are in the middle of reviewing next year's budget, but the rival parties are already locking horns on whether the plan is sufficient for boosting the ailing domestic economy. Our Ji Myung-gil reports.
Discussions on next year's budget have begun at the National Assembly, with the ruling and opposition parties promising to pass it by the legal deadline of December 2nd. The 2015 budget calls for a 5.7% on-year increase in government spending to some $350 billion.
We must meet the legal deadline, as it is our last best opportunity to boost Korea's economy.
The ruling Saenuri party says the budget promoted by the government as necessary for boosting the economy must be kept intact. But the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has been stepping up its attacks on the government's recent expansionary fiscal and monetary policies, promoting its own plan instead.
We have 5 principles set for next year's budget: endorsing financial health for the central and local governments, restoring corporate taxes for conglomerates, increasing household income, and securing a bigger budget for safety-related purposes.
Compounding concerns about the increased budget plans, the government has been facing a shortfall of tax revenue since 2012. According to the Finance Ministry, the government collected $126 billion in national tax revenue from January to August, which is down to $178 million from the same period last year. And while both parties are speaking in optimistic terms about the budget being passed by December 2nd, Korea's parliament is notorious for its year-end budget wars. No budget bill has been passed by the legal deadline since 2002. However, that won't be the case this year, as parliamentary law revisions made last year mean the draft proposal will be automatically referred to the regular session on December 1st, even if the rival parties don't reach an agreement on the bill. Kim Hyung-gin, Arirang News.
Korea and China have agreed to conduct a joint surveillance in the West Sea to crack down on illegal fishing by Chinese nationals in Korean waters. Korea's Fisheries Ministry said Monday that the two countries will begin patrols before the end of this year. Talks on the issue were delayed after a Chinese fishing boat captain was killed last month in a clash with Korean Coast Guard officials who had raided the vessel. It's the latest in a series of violent incidents between the two sides in recent years. In 2011, a Korean Coast Guard official was stabbed to death during a raid. Over 1,800 Chinese boats have been seized for illegal activities within Korea's exclusive economic zone in the last 5 years. If you could travel to any place in the world, where would you go? Well, for Koreans, the top answer is Europe. In a survey conducted by the travel site Expedia on 1,000 working men and women in their 20s to 40s, more than 34% picked Europe as the top destination for traveling without a package deal. Coming in second place with 30% of the votes was Southeast Asia, including countries like Thailand and Singapore. Places closer to home came in third, with 27% of the voters opting for Taiwan, Japan, or China.
A United Nations panel has issued a stark warning on global climate change, underscoring the need to slash greenhouse gas emissions to zero by the end of this century.
With more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, this is one of the most comprehensive reports released on climate change, but what are the consequences if the world doesn't heed this warning?
Well, the implications could be catastrophic. The newly released UN report said climate change, if left unchecked, will have irreversible impacts on people and the environment. Speaking in Copenhagen on Sunday, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon warned that world leaders must act now, as time is not on our side. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The United Nations climate body is warning that time is not on our side to stop soaring temperatures, making the world unlivable. Launching the latest study from the Environmental Panel on Climate Change, the UN said the world faces severe, widespread, and irreversible effects if moves are not made to completely stop using fossil fuels by 2100. It says the use of low-carbon sources needs to rise from 30% of electricity generation now to more than 80% by the middle of the century to limit rising temperatures.
The window of action is really closing very rapidly. If you look at the total carbon budget to ensure that temperature increase by the end of this century will not exceed 2 degrees Celsius, we've already used up a substantial share of this.
Scientists say a rise of 2 degrees Celsius is the level at which the dangerous impacts of climate change will be felt. But the IPCC says the world is at risk of temperatures soaring by 4.8 degrees or even higher by 2100 if things continue as they are.
So this clearly shows that we have a very limited window of opportunity, and I think the global community must look at these numbers and show the resolve by which we can bring about change.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon also stressed the need for action before it's too late.
Inaction of climate action will cost much, much more. This climate action and economic growth are two sides of just one coin.
The IPCC study will be the main handbook for 200 nations when they meet for a global summit on climate change in Paris late next year. China, the United States, the EU, and India are the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitters. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And turning to Pakistan, an apparent suicide bomber has attacked the country's only border crossing with India, killing over 50 people and injuring more than 100 others. Pakistani police say they are still investigating Sunday's deadly attack as security remained on high alert along the border area in the early morning hours on Monday. The explosion took place near the Pakistani city of Lahore, with women and children among the dead.
We have about 60 injured people. We are transferring them to different hospitals. We are transporting the dead bodies to the morgue. We have to do three things. We have to secure the crime scene, we have to identify the dead bodies, and hand them over to their relatives.
The Pakistani Taliban has claimed responsibility for the blast, saying it was in retaliation to counter-terrorism operations near the country's border with Afghanistan. And the double murder of two women has gripped the city of Hong Kong as police charge a British banker in connection to the case. After the young banker called police to his home, investigators discovered the body of one victim with stab wounds, while the other was found inside a suitcase. Both victims were reportedly prostitutes and from Indonesia. George Canton Judding was arrested and briefly appeared in court on Monday, where he declined to enter a plea. According to court documents, Judding had recently worked at Bank of America Merrill Lynch as a securities trader. Though a bustling city of 7 million, the incident has come as a shock, as Hong Kong is known for its low crime rates, with only 14 cases of homicide reported in the first half of this year. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Korea's favorite and #1 messaging application, KakaoTalk, is stretching its boundaries and aiming to go global, backed by new services and its recent merger with Korea's #2 internet portal operator, Daum Communications. But will it be enough to win over consumers outside of Korea? Our Shin Se-min has this week's industry insight.
9 out of 10 smartphone users in Korea use KakaoTalk, the country's #1 mobile messaging service. In Korea, you don't say "I'll text you," you say "I'll KakaoTalk you." But it's not stopping there.
The services KakaoTalk offers are expansive and growing all the time. Users can send small amounts of money, go shopping, and even send gifts and vouchers. KakaoTalk is also able to connect small businesses with their customers. Soon, it aims to roll out features that allow users to call a taxi and control their home appliances, and even help drivers find an empty parking spot.
We already have a solid platform here at Kakao, but we never stop innovating, and extra features are in the works all the time. By making use of Daum's established portal, we're looking to provide more state-of-the-art services that will eventually be used in our daily lives.
Those state-of-the-art services will come with the pairing of Kakao and the nation's second-largest internet portal, Daum Corporation, this year, and from going public last month. Daum Kakao currently has a market capitalization of over $7 billion, making it one of the country's largest IT firms. Under its new slogan, "Connect Everything," Daum Kakao is hoping to lead the march to have everything connected to the internet. A personalized location-based service is under development, drawing on the strength of each arm of the business. By utilizing Daum's pre-existing and highly detailed map service, KakaoTalk hopes to launch a feature that notifies users when they're near a restaurant chain or clothing store they like. However, challenges lie ahead, namely convincing international consumers to make the jump to KakaoTalk.
Kakao missed the boat for entering the global market. Countries already have their preferred messaging services. In China, they like WeChat. Line is in Japan, and WhatsApp has a grip on the US. It's going to be really hard for Kakao to squeeze in between.
The company also has problems at home due to a privacy scandal. A significant number of users abandoned KakaoTalk for foreign messaging applications like Germany's Telegram, following the revelation that the Korean company had given prosecutors access to thousands of users' private conversations. Analysts point to its strength in user-friendly services in this intensely competitive market of messaging applications. Whether KakaoTalk's success story will develop as a global tale based on that strength, or whether it's going to stay within Korea, remains to be seen. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Hello and welcome. I'm Stephen Che with your look at sports. Starting with baseball, the 2014 KBO Korean Series is set to begin Tuesday between playoff winner, the Nexen Heroes, and the defending champion, Samsung Lions. The entire season has culminated in the final 7-game series. The KBO's best teams, number 1 Samsung faces number 2 Nexen in what's expected to be a slugfest between the league's top-hitting teams in terms of hits, runs, RBIs, home runs, and average. Pitching-wise, Samsung carries the stronger bullpen, but Nexen has Andy Van Hecken, the only 20-game winner this season. And speaking of, Van Hecken faces Rick Vandenherk on the mound as the Lions host the Heroes for Game 1 in Daegu Tuesday evening. And turning to the games on the night, first to the KBL, the Goyang Orions took on the fast-rising Dongbu Promi. Now, despite a big first-quarter lead by Dongbu, the Orions tied up by the half. But David Simon in the third and Anthony Richardson in the fourth seal it for Dongbu, handing the home team their third straight loss. Now over to pro volleyball in the V-League. The Korean Air Jumbos held home court against the LIG Graders. Now, the Graders kept the Jumbos grounded in the first set, but Korean Air, piloted by Michael Sanchez, soared to the second and third set wins. The fourth set goes the distance, but the Jumbos close it out 33-31 for the fourth-set win. And moving on, South Korea football manager Uli Stilica announced his squad for November's friendly matches, and one pick in particular caused a bit of a stir. That's Park Ju-young, who until recently had a lackluster or even terrible year. Another surprise pick, goalkeeper Chung Sung-yong, as well as other World Cup teammates, also got the call. Stilica's team will meet next Monday to fly out to face Jordan, then Iran on the 14th and 18th this month. And finally to tennis, Serbian powerhouse Novak Djokovic defeated Canadian Milos Raonic at the Paris Masters 6-2 and 6-3 for the title and his 600th win of his career. He also retained his top world ranking, all this since becoming a father almost 2 weeks ago. Title defense in Paris was his 20th Masters title and is added steam for the 27-year-old ahead of next week's ATP Tour Finals in London. And that's all I have for now. Stay tuned for your weather coming up next. Have a great night.
Hello, I'm Kim Bo-kyung with weather updates. Well, it looks like winter is already here. Earlier today, cold wave advisories were issued, but have since been lifted. And at the moment, we are under clear skies due to a high-pressure system from China. Also, a dry weather watch remains in effect for Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-do provinces, as well as Seoul. And those of you headed out should dress warmly, as temperatures will dip below the seasonal average through tomorrow morning. Looking ahead, showers will fall along the eastern coast on Thursday and Friday, and on Jeju over the weekend. On to Tuesday's readings. Seoul starts off the day at 5 degrees before reaching 18 in the afternoon. On to other regions. Daejeon and Jeju reach 16, Dokdo hits 15. That will do it for now. I'll be back with more after midnight.
Thanks, Po-kyung. That's primetime news for this Monday. I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Kang Tae-ri. We'll see you again soon. Have a great evening.